Britain is hit with more industrial action over a long-running pay dispute between workers and the government. Teachers and train drivers have staged nationwide strikes to press for their demand. According to the Trades Union Congress, about 500,000 workers are taking part, making it the biggest strike action in more than a decade. Over 85% of schools in England and in Wales would remain closed on Wednesday. Commuter chaos has been anticipated as 15 train operators have planned zero train services. Workers are angry over the rampant inflation that has outpaced their earnings. They are demanding an increase in their wages in line with inflation. Most public sector workers, ranging from healthcare to railways, energy and education, have staged mass walkouts since last summer, causing widespread disruptions across the UK. Said Purazar is our correspondent joining us from London to tell us the latest on this. And Mahmoud Rafat, president of the European Institute for International Law, joins us from Stockholm for an analysis on this. Welcome to you both. Said, I'll start with you first. Tell us what you have. And the particular question I have is looking at the feeds that are coming through on this. You have a lot of people who are on strike who are standing still in front of something. I'm guessing it's a building or maybe somebody speaking. I don't know if you have information on that particular shot. I'm wondering what they're looking at in particular.
I think what you're referring to is the cenotaph. I think it's right across from where the treasurer's office is. They're at what is referred to as Whitehall, which is a stone's throw away from number 10 Downing Street, the residence office of the Prime Minister, at the moment Rishi Sunak. But we have moved away from that since we last time spoke. I'm just outside a school in West London, one of the 23,000 schools that have been closed or are partially closed as teachers walk out to be there outside the Prime Minister's office or near his office, along with lots of other people. You're looking at, given the source, between more than 100,000 people or 300,000 teachers who have walked out, in addition to members of ASLEF, the train drivers unions, university staff members, and others. A total of nearly 500,000 people, forming the largest coordinated day of action in a generation in the UK today, in England and Wales in particular. And they are pretty much singing from the same hymn sheet, Kaveh. What they're asking for is better pay and better conditions for themselves, for the at the places that they work. And in particular, when it comes to teachers, Kaveh, they have seen their workload only increase over the years, especially during the pandemic years and since, and their pay only go down or not catch up with the inflation that, as we know, is at 10.5% as we speak. And they're out there to send that message to the people in charge, hoping that they will take notice this time round. And they are, of course, saying that if this doesn't work, they're going to do it again. They're in it for the long haul, that they're going to carry on for as long as it takes for that to happen. Of course, it comes after the government introduced that legislation in recent weeks to require workers working in the different sectors, or require unions to provide a basic minimum level of service, rather, during strike days. The TUC, the Trains Unions Congress, that represents pretty much all the unions, has rejected that as a very tall order, and that restriction of people's right to go on strike at a time like this, when their wages are not really catching up with the worsening cost of living here, and an inflation that has hovered around the double digits that I mentioned over the past few months. And so hence that is the situation now, and hence that large number of people out there in the streets today marching and demanding that their demands be met. So, and those demands, as I say, are basically better pay and better working conditions. Schools, again, are talking about having to pick up the pieces, and by that I mean students coming to schools hungry, and the schools do not have the funding to be able to provide that for more children who are bearing the brunt of it all, really. Teachers who are complaining that they do not have the wherewithal, the financial resources to pay for the paraphernalia of teaching, and so at the end of the day is the students who are suffering. There are comparisons being made between, for instance, the education system here in the UK and those in Singapore, for instance, or Finland, and how they're doing better than the UK, despite the fact that the UK is one of the richest countries on the planet. In subjects, for example, such as maths and English that are very well emphasized really here by the government, but when you ask the teachers who are actually doing the work, they're saying that they're not being able to do their job right because of the lack of funding. And the pay rise, I think it's important to say, the government gave them last year to the tune of 5%. They're asking the schools to come up with the pay rise for the teachers by finding quote unquote efficiencies, which is you have to come up with the pay rise for the teachers from the funding you have. But the teachers and the schools are saying we're already overstretched. We can't really do that.
You mean like from their
so
pay?
More funding will
Are they
have to be
in
provided.
particular? Are they in particular referring to their pay, or are we looking at other things?
Whether today's action will be able to do it.
Okay, you probably didn't get the question I asked. All right, Mahmoud
That's
Rafat.
what I heard is it's their pay. If you want.
Yeah, I'll get back to you, Saeed. So Mahmoud Rafat, here we are. We're looking at what's called biggest strike action in about 12 years. And about 500,000 are out there striking different sectors which have gone on strike prior. And aside from the fact that you're losing all these days to industrial action, and as a result, you're going to have the economy obviously get affected by this. Why are we not seeing the type of resolve on behalf of the government to solve this? Is it because the increase or the rate of inflation is so high that the government can't meet that when it comes to these people, to these workers? Or are we looking at a government that just doesn't want to pay out money to them because the government is channeling money, for example, to the war in Ukraine and other things, but it doesn't seem like it's trying to solve this problem the way that it should. I mean, at this point, months and months so far have gone by with strike action.
Well, the economic crisis in Europe in general and in UK in particular is bigger than the government of this time of 2023, of winter 2023. The appearing reason is to be the Ukrainian war and the side effects of the Ukrainian war, also the energy crisis, while the crisis is bigger than that. The crisis is much bigger than that and deeper than that. It has lots of details. The crisis has details existed in the situation, the plans of the government, the UK or France, the economic plans, I mean, which were put, the chaos also, and this is the main reason, in my opinion, and the bigger reason than the Ukrainian war is the chaos which is following the COVID-19 conditions. Don't forget, we spent more than 30 months blocked. There is paralyzing in the world economy. There is complete paralyzing everywhere, and the economic on the economic levels that impacted radically the situation, and that increased the situation. Also, somehow in the West, each part took its own interest far away from the left, from the rest of the coalition. And that we saw it, we witnessed that when the US federal raised the interest several times, I think 4 times during 2022, and that made the euro to go in a very down situation, and meanwhile to increase the inflation because the euro cannot, the Central European Bank cannot follow the U.S. Federal Reserve to increase the interest as the American side made. That's why it impacted a lot the Eurozone, accordingly impacted the British economy, which is somehow also not linked anymore after the Brexit, but close and depending in big part of it on the British, on the European economy. So there are several reasons gathered for the moment, while the Ukrainian war is flashing and taking the eyes because this is the biggest event at the moment. But the main reasons are several reasons and gathered at the same time. That's why I repeat, the economic crisis is much bigger than any government or any administration in Europe for the moment.
All right, last question goes to you, Said Pourreza. You were talking about how, I think something about the, not too sure if it was the government that you said, has said that the budget, for example, for schools need to be, the payouts need to fill that budget. There's not going to be increases. Do you get the feeling that the government is doing enough from what you're reading as to meeting these people who want pay increases, and how you gauge how long this is going to last? Based on the way that the government is responding, obviously they're the ones that the strikers are dealing with.
The answer, Kaveh, is certainly not. It doesn't seem to be doing enough to put the disputes with different industries to rest, at least not for the foreseeable future. They would like many people to have many people believe that they are doing all they can, but that's not what the impression I'm getting from the people I'm talking to. The teachers that I talked to today, for example, they're not saying the problems to do with Ukraine or the pandemic. These are recent problems. But what has happening today has to do with the past 10 years of conservative rule in this country. The austerity of the 2010s, the pay freeze in the public sector for the next decade or so, up until today. Then of course, came the 2016 referendum on leaving the European Union, known as Brexit. All of those things have had the cumulative impact on people's lives that we're experiencing today. And so what they're receiving now, after having been through all of those things, all of those stages, if you will, Brexit, the pandemic, and now having to do with skyrocketing energy prices as a result of the UK-backed and NATO-backed war in Ukraine, they're getting half what they're asking for in terms of their pay rise.
Okay.
And again,
let me jump in because I got just a few minutes left. I'm so sorry to jump in here.
Of the NHS, only
Said,
to be asked to find efficiencies in the budget they have.
Said, I'm so sorry to jump in, but I need to ask you this before I let you go, because it just came to my mind. When you have 500,000 Brits in London on the streets who are not attending their work, obviously that means that their pay is getting cut. I'm wondering, the depth of this is bigger than what we're seeing. I mean, this is 500,000, the biggest in 12 years, that they're going to continue with this, and whether that's going to obviously keep cutting into their workday pay, and whether the government is realizing this, how the employers are dealing with people leaving their jobs or schools, etc. I mean, how is that being dealt with? Quickly, if you can.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Again, basically, we have two sides to the story. There's the government. As early as this morning, the education secretary is saying that, look, go ahead and strike as much as you want, but there is no money. There will be no pay rises, at least the amount that you're asking for. They're hoping, the government is, that inflation will be halved in the next year. Whether that is likely or not, I'll leave that to the economists. And then we'll see the impact of the pay rises that the government is offering to the public sector workers. The public sector workers and the unions that represent them say, look, we want a pay rise that is matching the inflation, which is at 10.5%. And that if you look at the pay freeze over the past 10 years, we have received a pay cut. So 5% is not quite going to cut it. How are the businesses handling the situation? There are agency workers who are doing it. There are people who are already overstretched and overworked, but they're still stepping in to keep the services that are in place going while their other colleagues go out there on the streets.
Okay.
But when it comes to school, there is no doubt that the impact of it all will be felt by the students who have been through 2 years of the pandemic, online learning, certainly don't want to go back to that.
All
But
right.
yes, that is being felt on the ground in schools across the country.
Appreciate it. Thank
More than 23,000 of them who have been impacted as a result of today's action.
Said, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Said Purazadeh, our correspondent from London. Mahmoud Rafat, thank you, President of the European Institute for International Law, who spoke to us from Stockholm.